The planet RX-9 was a graveyard, not metaphorically. Every species that had tried to land there, every drone, every exploration pod, every foolish attempt at colonization, had ended in disaster. The air was toxic. The gravity was brutal. The storms never stopped. RX-9 was death itself, wrapped in an atmosphere thick with corrosive gases and a landscape that tried to kill anything that set foot on it. Which is why, when a human ship went down there, the Galactic Council wrote them off immediately. No search team was deployed. No rescue mission was considered. They simply marked the ship as total loss and moved on. Because no one could survive on that planet. Not for a week, not for a day, certainly not for 3 years. And yet, when a passing vessel finally detected a signal from RX-9's surface, reality itself had to be re-evaluated. Because the human wasn't just alive, they were thriving, and they were very, very annoyed that it took this long. Commander Julik stared at the transmission feed, his claws tightening against the console. "This is a joke," he muttered, his voice low with disbelief. His crew, seasoned rescue operatives who had never once extracted a survivor from RX-9, stood in stunned silence. Because the human's voice was crystal clear. "About damn time you people showed up." Julik's mandibles clicked. "You're saying you survived? For 3 years?" The response was dry, unimpressed. "Yeah, and?" One of Julik's officers, Kalar, spoke up, his voice tinged with confusion. "We assumed you perished." The human snorted through the transmission. "Well, you assumed wrong. Now, are you sending a shuttle down or what?" Julik exchanged incredulous looks with his crew. This should not be possible. And yet, here they were. The rescue shuttle shuddered as it entered RX-9's atmosphere. Winds howled, battering the craft with violent turbulence. The toxic clouds churned below them, streaks of electric storms flashing violently through the dense air. Even through reinforced plating, Julik could feel the gravity pressing down, making every movement just a little heavier. His pilot, a reptilian species built for high-G environments, grunted as he adjusted the controls. "This planet should have killed them," he muttered. Julik didn't respond, because he was thinking the same thing. And yet, there was the signal beacon, still active, still transmitting, still human. The shuttle landed hard, the reinforced landing gear groaning under the immense gravity. Julik and his team suited up, activating their rebreathers to filter out the poisonous atmosphere. Weapons were drawn, not because they expected hostility, but because nothing made sense anymore. They stepped onto the planet's surface, a wasteland of jagged rock and swirling acidic winds. And then they saw it. Not a corpse, not a broken, withered figure on the verge of death, but a standing, breathing, living human. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in makeshift armor pieced together from salvaged ship plating and the hide of some unknown creature. His face was weathered but strong, eyes sharp, posture relaxed, arms crossed like he was waiting for them. Julik couldn't speak, because this was not a survivor. This was a man who had conquered this world. The human tilted his head. "Well, you guys just gonna stand there? Or did you actually bring beer?" Julik's mind short-circuited. This was not happening. This was not possible. And yet, the human was real. And Julik had a very, very bad feeling that the worst shock was yet to come. Behind the human, hidden among the jagged rock formations, was something that shouldn't exist. A fortress, not a wreck, not a crude makeshift shelter, a fully functioning defensive structure built from salvaged ship parts and native materials. Julik stared. "How?" The human grinned. "Turns out, this planet's only impossible to survive on if you're weak." Julik's mandibles twitched. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't bravado, it was just a fact, a cold, undeniable fact. Because the human had not just survived, he had adapted, he had built, and worse, he was comfortable. Back on the shuttle, Ulick sat across from the human, studying him. So, Ulick hesitated. What did you do for 3 years? The human shrugged. Built a home, hunted, figured out which plants wouldn't kill me. He gestured vaguely toward his armor. Also, turns out some of the things here taste great if you cook 'em right. Ulick blinked. You domesticated the wildlife? The human smirked. More like I out-stubborned it. Silence. Then, Kalar, still pale, muttered under his breath. Deathworlders. Ulick had never agreed with the term more, and as he stared at the unbreakable human sitting before him, he realized something else. They hadn't rescued him. They had interrupted him, and the human wasn't happy about it. Ulick sat across from the human, struggling to process reality. 3 years. 3 years alone on a planet where nothing should survive. And yet, here he was, not just alive, but thriving. Ulick finally found his voice. Who are you? The human leaned back, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed with the question. Lieutenant Carter Hayes, Terran Navy. Was. He smirked. I guess I'm officially unemployed now. Ulick's mandibles twitched. The sheer casualness in his tone was infuriating, and at the same time, terrifying. Because normal people, normal species, didn't just shrug off 3 years in a literal death trap. The rescue team followed Carter through the jagged terrain, passing weathered metal plating, salvaged wreckage, and towering walls made from creature bones and hardened resin. It was impressive and horrifying, because this wasn't a survival shelter. This was a settlement. Ulick studied the stone pillars, the reinforced gates, the defensive barriers placed at strategic points. How did you build all this? Carter didn't slow his stride. Had to. First few months, everything wanted me dead. He gestured vaguely to the distance. Figured if I didn't want to end up as fertilizer, I'd have to get creative. Ulick exchanged wary glances with his crew. Creative? Carter smirked. Yeah. You know, build shelter, learn which local wildlife is edible, domesticate some of it, scare off the rest. Ulick froze. Wait, domesticate? Carter whistled sharply, and then the ground shook. Something large emerged from behind a ridge, stepping into view. Ulick's brain short-circuited, because there, standing beside the human, was a massive, 6-legged reptilian creature. Armor-plated, built like a war tank, easily the size of a shuttle. It lowered its head, snorting warm breath over Carter's shoulder. And Carter patted its snout like a pet. Ulick's mind broke. You tamed one of those things? Carter chuckled. Tamed is a strong word, more like we made an agreement. I don't eat her, she doesn't eat me. Works out pretty well. Ulick wasn't sure if he wanted to scream or sit down. This wasn't just survival. This was conquest. Back on the Varun, the rescue crew was divided, because there was one major problem. Carter didn't want to leave. Ulick stared at him. You do understand we're taking you off this planet, right? Carter shrugged. Do you have coffee? Ulick blinked. Yes? Carter sighed. Fine. I'll go. Ulick's claws clenched. This man had survived on an uninhabitable planet for 3 years, had built a fortress, had tamed a creature strong enough to tear through a shuttle hull, and he was only leaving because of coffee. As the Varun took off, Carter stared down at the planet below. He looked annoyed. Ulick hesitated. You're really not happy about this, are you? Carter exhaled. I just spent 3 years turning that place into something livable, and now I'm leaving it behind. Ulick's mandibles twitched. You act like you'll be back. Carter smirked. Who says I won't? Ulick's blood ran cold, because he believed him, and somehow Ulick knew this wasn't the last time the galaxy would hear about Carter Hayes. The Varun hurtled through space, leaving RX-9 behind, but Carter didn't look relieved. He looked bored. Ulick sat across from him in the shuttle's mess hall, watching the human casually sip coffee like he hadn't just been pulled from a death world. "You're really not happy about leaving, are you?" Ulick finally asked. Carter shrugged. "It's not that. Just took you guys long enough." Ulick's mandibles clicked in irritation. "You do realize you were listed as dead, right? No one even considered a rescue." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, that sounds like a you problem." Ulick's claws tightened against the table. Of all the species in the galaxy, humans had to be the most infuriating. The moment the Varun docked with the Galactic Council's rescue station, Carter was swarmed. A team of medics, scientists and military officers practically threw themselves at him, scanning him, testing him, demanding reports. Carter tolerated it for exactly 10 minutes before deciding he was done. "Guys, I'm fine. Stop poking me." A council scientist, an elder from the Forlath species, stared at his test results in growing horror. This is impossible," he muttered. "Your body, it's completely adapted." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Well, yeah. I was there for 3 years. Would have been real inconvenient if I didn't." Ulick sighed. "That's not how it works, Carter." Carter smirked. "Clearly it is." The scientists looked at each other, then back at the results. RX-9's crushing gravity should have destroyed his skeletal structure. The toxic atmosphere should have left lasting damage. The radiation levels alone should have shortened his lifespan. Instead, his bone density had increased, his muscle fibers had thickened, his lungs had adjusted to filter the toxins. Carter Hayes had evolved, and that was a problem. Ulick sat in a council chamber, watching as high-ranking officials argued over what to do with one very stubborn human. "He's a biological anomaly," one of the scientists hissed. "He's a security risk," another muttered. "He's a living testament to why humans are terrifying," one military officer added. Ulick sighed. "He's also sitting right outside this room and can hear everything you're saying." Silence. Then, the chamber doors opened violently, and Carter strolled in. "You guys realize I'm not a lab rat, right?" he said casually, plopping down into a seat. A council member, an elder from the Sulek Dominion, frowned. "You should not be alive." Carter grinned. "Well, that sounds like a you problem." Ulick buried his face in his hands. The council debated for hours, trying to decide what to do. Send him back to Earth? Keep him under surveillance? Quarantine him? Carter listened to all of it. Then he finally leaned forward. "Or," he said, grinning, "you could just let me go back." Ulick froze. "Back?" Carter nodded. "To RX-9. The entire room fell silent. The council leader's voice shook. "You want to return to a world where no one else has survived?" Carter smirked. "Yeah, it was kind of fun." Ulick felt sick. The council looked horrified. And that's when Ulick realized Carter was serious. The council chamber was silent. Not just quiet, dead silent. Every alien in the room, from high-ranking scientists to battle-hardened strategists, stared in horror at the human sitting comfortably in front of them. "You want to go back?" the council leader finally asked, voice trembling. Carter shrugged. "Yeah, why not?" Ulick resisted the urge to slam his head into the table. There had been a lot of theories tossed around since bringing Carter in, that he had suffered brain damage, that he had gone insane from isolation, that his survival instincts had completely broken down. But no, this wasn't madness. This was worse. This was human nature. Carter leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Look, you all thought I was dead. You wrote me off. I survived. I built a life there, and now I got to deal with a bunch of bureaucrats trying to decide if I should be studied." He smirked. "Here's a better idea. Just let me go back." One of the council scientists nearly fainted. "You can't be serious." Ulick's voice was tired. Carter grinned. "I'm always serious." Ulick sighed, rubbing his temples. "RX-9 is not habitable." Carter pointed at himself. Clearly it is. A Vorlath general snapped his mandibles in frustration. The radiation alone should have... Carter rolled his eyes. Yeah, should have killed me. But it didn't. A scientist slammed the table. You're an anomaly. Carter smirked. You say anomaly, I say trendsetter. Ulick wanted to scream. The debate lasted for 3 days. In the end, the council came to a decision, one that terrified them, one that Carter Hayes found absolutely hilarious. Fine, the council leader finally said, exhausted. We won't force you to stay. Carter grinned. That's what I like to hear. Ulick closed his eyes, defeated. They were letting him go back, to a planet that had killed every other species that had set foot on it, because Carter Hayes wanted to. Ulick turned to him. You're insane. Carter laughed. No, I'm human. The Varun descended once more, touching down near Carter's fortress. Carter stepped off the ramp, inhaling deeply. Ulick watched in disbelief as the human stretched, relaxed, and sighed contently. Man, Carter muttered. Feels good to be home. Ulick gave up. There was no understanding humans. There was only accepting that the galaxy would never be the same.